Greg says, Tara rearranged her house. I can't see what's happening in her yard. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't rearrange. Yeah, yes, I didn't rearrange. I'm at my mom's house. We're having work done on our house right now so that we can sell it. It needs work done before we can even sell it. We're buying a new house, so I'm at my mom's for the next few days. And she's only 2 miles away, but I had to get ready for the office today. I had to do my cardio in the morning, take a shower, put pants on, all this stuff. I even packed a lunch. I mean, it was just so unusual. Luckily, my commute was 5 minutes. It's super easy.
It makes a world of difference when you have to go move from one place to another, though. Like getting out and going somewhere, it really changes. I brought a
monitor with me to do that.
Yes, I've been in an office last week and this week for a client, and I'm like, oh, I can take things from my desk and I can put them in the office. It's going to be like but as soon as you get in there, you're like, yeah. Personal effects. Greg Smith says, Ancient Aliens. Excellent TV shows. I am a sucker for anything alienish too. The whole, I love the X-Files, and I'm so excited for the return. Oh.
Yes, me too. Big X-File fan here. We probably all are.
Yeah,
we're a little bit nerdy.
This generational thing, it was that, even if you weren't nerdy, I mean, that was just such a neat show. The personal dynamics.
Yeah.
Doctor Who was better. Buffy was better. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Mulder and Scully haven't aged. How many years was it in between the last season? Years and years and years. They look the same.
They're flawless human beings. They still look exactly like 33. I don't understand how that works.
But my big problem with X-Files is that it took so long for things to change and to happen to them. Mm-hmm. And it was especially in your early years, there was so much monster of the week. It was kind of like, let's move the characters along a little bit. They did in short little jumps, and you could actually watch, just a few episodes of each season and get the gist of what happened throughout the entire season.
Mm-hmm. It was like a Law and Order, but so you got just dribbled out pieces of their personality, but it's good. I suppose we should get started. It's 17 minutes after the hour. I know. I'm like, well, another thing I want to talk about X-Files.
Yeah, let's talk about social stuff.
Yes, why not? James says, do you guys have a good blog post that I can use to update 50 million rows in a SQL Server table? Should I use like the top clause? Ooh, I guess I wonder like how many rows are in it. If you're trying to update all of them, or if it's a percentage. What else would you ask?
Indexes, how many indexes are on there, and constraints.
Yeah, do you need to drop them? I've had to do these mass. I don't know if we have a blog post on the website or not, but I've had to do massive data changes at times. You might want to break it up into batches and use top clause and just keep going until you're done. That's going to run slower, but the idea is to run slower at times so that you don't cause so much blocking. But if you have a maintenance window, and if it will fit in the transaction log as one big transaction, you could do it as one. But I don't think I'd recommend it as one, just because it's so many rows, and in case it does roll back, you don't want to be having to wait a long time. So make sure you test it somewhere. But yeah, if you want to, even if you're in a maintenance window and if your system's 24/7 and you don't want to cause too much blocking, you break it up into say 10,000 row chunks. That's usually what my batch size is, 10,000.
Michael J. Swart has a great post on picking your batch sizes. If you search for Michael J. Swart, S-W-A-R-T, and batch sizes, he's got a great like A/B test graph where he shows all kinds of different batch sizes. And the idea isn't to use his sheet to find the right number for you. It's to use that methodology to find the right number for you. I'm with Tara. I just use like 5 or 10,000. I call it a day. Tricia says, is it even possible to do, to do an HADR type solution using built-in functionality between an on-premises server and something like Azure SQL DB?
Availability groups, right? You can do oh, you can't? Is that only when you do the other way?
Yeah, you have to build a VM. So if you build a VM, you can, but they don't let us do a replica up in Azure SQL DB yet.
Right.
And I know somebody in their grandma's basement, no offense to Tara, nothing to do, she's in her mom's, but somebody and specifically the basement with no windows.
We have no basements in San Diego.
That's true. Yeah. It's extra
or
floors
Miami. Yeah.
Chicago, actually. Where is it that they actually have basements? Somebody in Mom's Basement is going to say, you can do replication using transactional replication, but it's not DR. That's designed for a one-way move, and you don't come back.
On my Brent Ozar Unlimited profile, I think I say replication is not an HA or a DR solution. I'm adamant about that. I don't care if you've used it for HADR. It is not.
It is so true. Tara had me at, it is not a. And I was, yes, correct, yes. Andrew asks an interesting question. How do you guys foresee the uptake for SQL 2017 on Linux? And do you think that Microsoft will now start to, he says attract, I thought he meant attack, but will now start to attract the Oracle Enterprise Database market share? What do you guys think?
I don't know that that's gonna attract the Oracle market share. I don't know. Maybe the other database technologies out there, but Oracle, I don't know. I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Richie, what's your thought? Reading tea leaves. Which character is that you were flying in front of the webcam there?
That's Star-Lord in the Milano.
Don't even know what that is.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 coming out actually today, yes. and that's why Balls IM'd me, because he had an extra ticket in Orlando, and I'm like, I'm not in Orlando. I'm like, I'm not going to freaking Orlando, but I considered it.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I think the Linux thing is interesting. The question is not to go to Linux from SQL Server, but why would someone on Linux go to SQL Server as opposed to Postgres or Oracle, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the question rather than anything else. So, I mean, are they significantly lower the price? So now we're half as price as Oracle? Maybe then that's a question. But
we are already we're cheaper than Oracle, because in order to use any feature in Oracle, you have to pay for it. Whereas SQL Server, you do that one payment or whatever, enterprise or standard, and then you're done. Oracle, you have to every single feature you have to add. It's super expensive in Oracle. Even Enterprise Edition SQL Server is cheaper than Oracle.
Yes. So now the question is, so if it's not the cost, so is it Linux really the big driver of people going to a different database?
It is for one of my companies. They were anti-Microsoft. I mean, every desktop was Windows, but servers, they wanted all Linux. And we were still a big SQL Server shop, but maybe for companies like that, it might make sense. But if they're
I have not run into one of those companies yet. So, okay. And I've been bounced around a lot like a tennis ball. So
yeah.
The question is, why wouldn't I go to Postgres at that point, right? So if I have a Linux machine, why am I not going to Postgres? What features are in SQL Server that are not in Postgres that I could use, or in some other database engine? I kind of dig Postgres. I've been doing it a little bit and doing a little Postgres dance.
Going to the dark side.
And it's dark too, and it's kind of musty, and it's different, and it's definitely different. But if I'm looking at SQL Server on Linux, my question would then be, why? Why am I doing that? Because the first release isn't going to be as good as it's going to be on Windows. So why are we doing it? I don't know. I don't see the end game
either. Hardly any of the features are in the product.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't see the end game. Maybe in 3 years I will, but I don't see a reason why me as a CTO would go to Linux on SQL Server yet. The carrot's not there yet.
Wait a minute. Did Richie get promoted to CTO? Did he get a pay raise with that?
Actually, I had to pay Brent.
Maybe we'll look at that senior network job, LinkedIn, email.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think the only edge case I've ever heard about it is if somebody they have an ISV app and it's only certified to use SQL Server and the company refuses to use Windows. That's the only thing I've heard. That's it. Wesley says, I know why SQL Server on Linux, because I am a SQL Server lover who is a closeted Linux lover. Then I can be like, yeah, I do that at our local user group meetings. Yeah.
I'll be the only one.
Right, exactly. Now, what about all your coworkers? Imagine that you got production SQL servers on Linux and they barely know Linux and they barely know SQL Server, and now they're herpa-derping their way through both. I'm like, ugh.
Well, I mean, look how quickly adoption is for 2016.
Yeah,
I mean, how quickly is adoption going to be for SQL Server on Linux on a completely different platform?
Yeah.
And I always want to show that just because it's so interesting. I'm going to fire up.
I can never remember the website address for that.
Yeah, SpotlightEssentials.com is Quest's free version of Spotlight. And if you click on Collective IQ up at the top, they have the stats for all of the people who are using Spotlight or Spotlight Essentials. And so out there in the wild, they're seeing 0% 2016. It's not.
It's not zero. It's
not
rounding.
Servers. Yeah, just rounding. But then 2% of SQL Server 2000. So yeah, and it's not, to be really clear, all of us like 2016. I think it's the best release yet. I would put it into production myself. Big, huge fan. And 2000.
I mean, the issue is that starting with 2008, SQL Server is a really rock solid product. We can compete with Oracle as far as performance goes, and there's a lot of features in there. So why upgrade? If it's working.
Yeah,
because it's 10 years old.
Well, I agree, but that's what customers are thinking, or people who are using 2008 R2. I don't know what our percentage is for clients. I'd say 2008 R2 for me might be 40%, somewhere around there. Most are on 2012, 2014. I've had one client that's been on 2016. I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know if I know how to use it.
Surprise!
It's so interesting because it's so different than from the open source community when we're getting new versions on a weekly basis. I spent almost all day yesterday upgrading a project because I upgraded one piece open source project, and then it cascaded down to all these other projects that I had to update. And I had to update the unit test. I had to go check all this other stuff. And just because I updated one, and it's because it was a security issue. I needed to update it. And then all of a sudden I needed to go down that path of updating everything else. And that's just the way it is in open source. And so not updating your servers, which has things like that, and getting the new features and all that, it doesn't make sense to developers' head. And which is why I think, that we have a lot of disconnect between the way DBAs think and developers think.
Andrew, I see two things in there that tell me a whole lot about who you are and what you're doing, and I'm not going to mention last names, but you'll see why here in a second. He said for Linux availability groups, he says for one, cross-platform availability groups, except for the only way that that's useful is for reading. It's not useful for automatic failover between those, as far as I know. Like the last time I looked at it for the RTP or CTP2, you couldn't do automatic failover back and forth between Windows and Linux.
Wait a second. So availability groups now will support another server being Linux just for reading?
For reading. That was the last thing I saw in CTP2.
Oh, okay. Because in 2012 and 2014, probably 2016, you couldn't even have a different version of Windows. Windows 2012 R2 and Windows 2012. That was not allowed.
Yeah, starting with Win 2016 and SQL 2016, you can. They're doing it for upgrade purposes.
Just reading. Okay.
Yep. And then the other thing he says is try Docker containers for your apps. He's talking about apps that he's building, though. That's the thing, is it when you upgrade one part of it.
Right. So this is all like NPM package. I'm gonna do this in a database thing because that's what I'm gonna do. So it's an NPM package, one little piece of software. I'm actually running this app serverless. I don't worry about the OS. I don't worry about the runtime. It's all given to me. These are the actual pieces of software that I downloaded from NPM, where one little piece started a cascading effect on everything else underneath it. And that's just the way it works, right? You want to either you don't upgrade and you stick to where you at, or you have to continually change your code and update as the pieces of code that you bring into your application updates. I mean, I got a whole talk on this if you want, man. I mean, I could go off, but I'm not going to do that.
Not today.
No.
Dawn says, good morning. We had a power failure a few weeks ago, and I noticed on SQL Server Startup that there were many hundreds of transactions rolled forward on all databases, including master and model. Why were there so many transactions rolled forward when it was off hours and no user transactions were involved?
That's how many hadn't completed. Start logging your activity to who is active and see what's going on. If it were my system at one of my jobs, I would immediately suspect a Hibernate issue where they the application loses track of transactions and is leaving open transactions. So at previous jobs, we've had to set up automated stuff to kill transactions because eventually it starts causing tons of blocking. So maybe you're experiencing, and maybe you're not using Hibernate, but maybe you're experiencing transactions being left open and not being committed or rolled back.
I love it. Guillermo says, what's the correct formula? We have all kinds of ideas. I don't know if any of them are correct. And what's the correct formula to determine how much memory to leave on the operating system for a SQL server? I thought 4 to 6 gigs for Windows would be enough, but I recently heard it should be more on a 384 gig of RAM server.
We have a blog article on that. I don't know if you want to post the link, but it says 10% or 4 gigabytes, whichever is higher. So for you, that's 38.4 gigabytes left to the Windows and the other processes. And then after that, there's an article that Jonathan Cahias has over at SQL Skills that he says after you've done that, monitor your available megabytes, and for a system with 384 gigabytes, you just want to make sure the Windows and other processes always have at least 1 gigabyte of free. So after, let it run after you've given 10% back to the OS. Let it run for a couple of weeks and see what available megabytes are, and so you possibly can give back more to SQL Server. But yeah, right now you need 38 according to the best practice.
Great example for why I was working with a guy in our senior DBA class. He said, nothing could possibly use that much memory. And I said, wait a minute, didn't you just say you had a Fusion IO drive in there for TempDB? And he goes, yeah. And I said, they use RAM for their drivers? They keep a map in memory of where all the stuff is? He said, it can't be that big. And we popped open the manual. And I said, well, based on the size of your drive in the model, it needs 58 gigs of RAM per drive. Wow. Yeah, not a small amount of memory. So definitely watch how much memory you have available there.
Oh my gosh.
That's insanity.
Intels don't do that, but SanDisk, the Fusion IO stuff, keeps maps in memory of where your data lives.
Man, I had no idea. One of my jobs, and that system's still in production. It's using Fusion IO, and that was a 256 gigabyte of RAM, and I would have configured it to the 10%
right.
Best practice. So, oops.
And you really got to dig to find this out. Like you got to go digging through best practices manuals. And go, okay, how much is it? How much does it need? It's based on the NTFS allocation unit size and the size of the drive.
Oh wow.
Mark says, hi guys, I have a stored procedure that sometimes changes its plan based on an unusual parameter passed into it, and then it runs badly for normal parameters. I've been using traces to see execution time for that stored procedure, and then if I see it increasing, I clear the plan and let it recreate with the normal parameter. What should he do differently?
Well, I mean, why is it happening? What's causing the bad plan or the good plan to go out of the plan cache? I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours on this topic, parameter sniffing, and I've put plan guides in place in 2012 and then and greater, to make sure that we get the right plan. I know in older versions, one of the solutions was to create a job and that would just run the store procedure every minute or so that if it got out of the plan, the good plan got out of the plan cache, there was a chance for another good plan to get loaded because they had tested the parameter values. But you can't do that when the store procedure is using inserts, updates, and deletes. But look into index hints, plan guides, as well as option recompile if you can, depending upon how often this query runs. Optimize for, that's a really good one. So if you know what parameter values work best for when it gets optimized for a certain set of parameter values, then optimize for it can be a good choice. I like optimize for the best, and I have instead of putting that directly into the store procedure code, I have put that into a plan guide just because I didn't have access to the source control store procedure stuff, and I can put a plan guide on top of a store procedure.
It works.
Didn't the Stack Overflow have that problem with John Skeet, and they created their own John Skeet store procedure for that?
Yeah, there's so many good stories around that, especially over at Stack. We did some branching code. If the user ID is this, go run this code. Otherwise, run this other code. It has to be in different stored procedures for this to work.
Right.
If you want to deep dive way deeper onto this, go to groupby.org. Groupby.org is our totally free community conference. It's online. The next one's coming up in June 2nd and 9th. But Guy Glancer last week or 2 weeks ago had a really good session on how to use parameters like a pro and boost performance. It's like 90 minutes long. So go to groupby.org and click watch past sessions. then go to parameters down there, and really good fast-paced session. He goes really quick in there. Ben says, my company is about to set me up, woohoo, with an Azure infrastructure as a services, including nothing again, just if they're going to set you up. I'm like a Porsche, a Ferrari, not like a server, including always-on availability groups on SQL Server 2012. What should I watch out for with always-on availability groups, and how is Azure different from private cloud VMs? Oh, what if you were going to give somebody a shorter a starter guide on what to watch out for with AGs? What would you warn them about?
Well, so I mean, they're specifically asking about Azure. So I mean, if this were, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter what the if it's on-prem or Azure or somewhere else. What I would look for availability groups is making sure I have, the cluster configuration properly. Make sure I have a witness. Make sure that I have the voting, set up properly, because my environments, we've had disaster recovery sites. Servers participate in an availability group at another site. So voting and quorum are the two big ones for me, as far as making sure that you don't cause an outage due to a misconfiguration. But that's on-prem or Azure or EC2 or GCE, doesn't matter. So I don't know specifically about Azure. I don't know if you have something on that, Brent.
Yeah, up on the screen I've got, if you go to simple-talk.com, simple-talk.com is Redgate's community blog thing, and they had two, Joshua Fireman, I believe is how you pronounce his name, or Fearman maybe, had two really good posts a few weeks ago about Azure load balancers. It's way harder to do this. I say way harder. So yeah, I think it's way harder to do this in Azure than it is AWS or GCE. You have to create a load balancer. And you have to know how their subnets work, so that the listener isn't managed by SQL Server. It's actually managed by Azure. So he has a great two-part write-up in there about Azure load balancers.
Yeah, I found that to be true kind of overall in most things in Azure, that AWS is easier to manage than in Azure. It feels like that Azure kind of adds in this enterprise layer that for most people kind of don't really need.
Yeah. Guillermo says, what's the performance impact in SQL Server of an allocation unit size of 4K versus 64K?
I think I asked that question when I attended SQL Skills training a few years ago, and I forget which one it was, Kimberly or Paul, but they didn't think that one was as big of a deal as people had made it. We still made sure that we were using 64K for our mount points that had the database files, and the stuff that had the smaller files, we would use the default. But I still do 64 just as a best practice.
Yeah, it's way less of a deal than it used to be. When we had dedicated magnetic spinning Rust, then it made more of a difference. But like these days on modern SANs, NetApp does everything internally in 4K chunks anyway, for example, so it matters less. Just check with your storage vendor. For example, with Google Compute Engine, they actually recommend 32K, and that's actually for SQL Server. I don't know why. I mean, just, oddball, they get the best performance that way. Plus, too, I'm like, if that's your biggest problem, you're usually in pretty good shape. Usually you see this when people have like 8 gigs of RAM.
I mean, if you're creating a new server, you might as well get it right the first time, because after this thing goes live and you realize that you didn't set it up right, it's not easy to fix. You're talking about reformatting that driver mount point and bring the files back.
I love questions that none of us are going to know how to answer, and I'm really curious to see, because I don't know of a way to do this. Greg says, our third-party SQL Server app uses speech recognition and dictation to enter information into SQL Server, and it stores all of the text in the clipboard. Do you guys know of any way to monitor and manage the clipboard?
Man, I feel like that this needs to be thrown out. Is it the clipboard on the database server or on the client side? I would hope that this is client side.
So
because
awesome.
Man, I would hope that you have the hardware in place on the database server to, that's going to be using a lot of memory.
Yeah. So I mean, the only thing that
client side.
Yeah, the only thing I use with the clipboard is Ditto, which is a clipboard manager, which means I can kind of go through all the stuff that I clip, but it doesn't monitor and it doesn't do alerting or anything like that. If you need that, I don't no. It sounds like the weirdest thing ever.
That's so cool. I get excited by that kind of thing. Who comes up with this idea? I'm going to put it.
I'm not building it for you.
But your phone, your phone has the dictation and stuff, but that's client side. It's not doing that on the SQL Server side if that's what the back end is. So I don't think that this is being done on the back end.
I bet it's there. Like people are saying things, and the app puts it into the buffer, and then somehow pastes it into like Access or something horrific like that. And I get even more mesmerized by that because, like with Apple devices, things that I put on my Clipboard on my phone or my iPad switch over to my laptop too. So it would be terrifying if someone's using my phone and it goes into my copy paste buffer and goes into the database server. Oh, God. Kelly says, is it normal for the blocked process report to use a huge amount of CPU? It's coming up in who is active as the top consumer, and our current block process threshold is 10.
I don't ever use it, so I don't know.
Neither.
I use who is active, and maybe sometimes if I'm just typing, sys processes and SPWho too. But yeah, for block processes, I do not use the report.
If you want an alternative to it, if you search for, second time Michael J. Swartz come up on our site, blocked process report viewer. This guy knows a whole lot about the block process report. I would go check in with him. He has even written his own block process report viewer too. But anytime I have to troubleshoot any kind of blocking for that long, I'm either just going to log SPWho is active to a table, or else I'm going to go get a monitoring app that just does it for me.
Exactly.
And then the last question that we'll take is from Chase. Chase says, why don't I read these questions before I say this? Chase says, all right, Chase, we're committed. Let's do this. We have a trigger on a table on a project that I inherited. The application is multi-threaded, and at times, 2 different threads can pick up the same record for modification.
Stop there. Something's wrong with the trigger. That should not be happening.
Oh, God. Are there hints that can be added to the trigger to prevent collisions on inserts and updates so that a primary key violation is not thrown? Or is there a way to ignore the primary key error? Yeah, take off the primary keys.
There you go. I had a recent client who is a vendor application, no primary key constraints anywhere. It's a really old app too, and they wanted to use transactional replication. It's like, well, you're gonna have to add primary key constraints. But something's wrong with the trigger. That should not happen. There's no reason that I've worked on systems that had 5 to 10,000 batch requests per second, very high insert volume in tables that had triggers. No problems like this. So something's wrong with your triggers.
Something odd with an isolation level, something unusual is going on.
Maybe using ADAT identity instead of scope identity, things like that. Things can get weird in triggers.
That's a great point. So to elaborate on that, if you search for ADAT identity and ADAT scope identity, you're going to see...
not ADAT scope identity.
It's scope
underscore identity, parentheses. Yeah. I don't know why they changed it. It's weird.
Function.
It'll say why, just plain old identity can get overwritten by triggers. I guess
yeah, my big question is why we're using triggers for processing like this.
He inherited it.
Yeah.
He had a nasty grandpa. That's all he got left.
This smells like a queue. It breathes like a queue. It should be put into a queue and processed. It's just. I know we said inherited. I'm hoping that's true, but that's a lot of things.
Chase says yes, so it probably is a queue.
It's probably not even his real name.
Sorry, Chase. Sorry.
I guess we'll take one more because this is really interesting and we'll all have opinions. MM says, in general, how much does an application DBA know about the data content that flows through the servers? Like what's in various tables and what data's upstream and what data's downstream?
I mean, she said application DBA, so that's kind of important to the question. I feel like an application DBA should know all about that. A production DBA may not, though. My last job, even though I was the primary DBA for a system, I never really even learned it in my year and a half there, and I barely knew what the business knowledge was for that system because it was just so complex and had been around for so long. But an application DBA, which I think is also a developer DBA, they need to know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've never met a DBA that I personally worked with, had a title DBA that knew what was going on in the database. It was myself as the app developer / designer that understood what the data is and how it should be formatted and stored and whatnot.
Well, let's drill down into that. How many DBAs have you worked with that even understood how SQL Server worked?
I've been, yeah.
They're on my hand. They're on my hand. Not two, but definitely one.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate and worked on really great SQL Server DBA teams. Very, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, so my feeling on this comes down to this blog post. How many servers can one person manage? And it's not just the image that's up on the screen. If you go through and read, I've got an explanation of what I'm about to tell you. But when all you do is rack and stack hardware, if you work for Google, Facebook, Amazon, Azure, whatever, you can walk a cart through a data center. Anything you see with a red light, you pull it out and replace it with something with a green light. One person can manage thousands of servers. Mm-hmm. The instant that you layer on the operating system, Windows, Linux, whatever, one person can manage the patching, configuration, and provisioning of hundreds of servers. Then when you start to layer in SQL Server, one person can effectively manage 50 to 100 instances of SQL Server. But you'll notice that as you scale up this ladder, the people up here tend to know less about the stuff down here. They just don't go into the data center anymore. Now, then if you layer in high availability and disaster recovery, always on availability groups, and I'm going to say the word replication, even though it's not high availability or disaster recovery.
Next, you're going to say recovery mode.
Yes. Simple recovery mode. One person can manage like 10 to 50 instances of SQL Server. And then by the time you get to performance tuning, you have to know database contents. You have to know what the tables mean, what the queries are doing, when it's safe to change a query. One person can generally manage between 1 and 5 applications. Now that application may be spread across 50 SQL servers. I'm working on a gig this week where it's just one app and we're going to build hundreds of SQL servers. One person can performance tune all of them because they'll know the queries and tables. But you could also be on a situation where you have one server with 50 databases on it that are all different apps and you can't know all of them. You may know the queries that suck, but you're just not going to know the data that flows in and out of all. Every now and then, I'll also hear someone say, well, I have to manage all of that, and I have 150 SQL servers. And I'm like, yeah, but when I run SP Blitz on your servers, they all suck. There are no databases and no backups. You have corruption errors out the wazoo.
How did you come up with these numbers? I feel like this is pretty accurate for the jobs that I've been at.
Right? This I wrote in 2015. Yeah, so it took me years to figure this out. I was just kind of like, how many servers you guys manage? And then came up with this over the years. So
yeah, one of my jobs actually rolling for a character in Dungeons and Dragons and came up.
But one of my jobs, we had 700 SQL servers, and it was like, 5, full-time SQL Server DBAs, and, we did have HADR, and then, I was a performance tuner as well, but for performance tuning, it really was, I'd say about 3 systems that I was really specialized in, but yeah, we had 700 servers.
And it wasn't that you can't do it. I mean, you can jump over to another server and start doing performance tuning, but every hour that you're on that, the other ones are falling apart, so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out with us this week at Office Hours. We will see you guys next week. Adios.
Bye.